There's still a lot of prefab furniture out there, but there is a massive return to handmade, custom stuff. Now it's more expensive, it's all that stuff. So I think we're gonna see these weird, we're gonna see a lot of prefab, which is kind of how I think about the generative AI. But we're also going to see, I think, a huge movement of people still wanting the things that are essentially handcrafted.
Yeah.
Right. All right, everybody, we are about to go live with another exciting episode of the UnDisrupted podcast. Yeah, we're recording on both, I believe, but let me double check. Yep, recording there.
All right.
Recording there. They'll have to, I feel bad for our editors. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, back to an exciting episode of the UnDisrupted podcast, coming to you live. That's right, live, Jonathan Spike, who walks by here at ISTE Live. We're joined, Adam, by none other, the man, the myth, the legend. You know him as Dr. Mr. Lehmann, but we just know him as Chris.
Oh,
Hey, Chris.
how you doing?
How is ISTE in your hometown?
You know, ISTE in the hometown, is always fun because you get to show people around, give people all the restaurant recommendations, but it also is exhausting because in addition to all of the ISTE-ness going on,
ISTE-ness.
you still got to pick up your kid from the camp bus, you still got to do all that stuff. So I love ISTE in my hometown, and I can't wait till next year when I get to not have ISTE in my hometown.
Okay, so let me ask you this as someone visiting Philly. What's the deal with the Whiz?
Whiz is for tourists.
Oh, you heard it here first, folks.
This is real Philadelphians do not eat Whiz on their cheesesteak. We eat provolone.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I'm a provolone guy. I tried the Whiz the first time. I was not impressed.
Whiz stays in your body. It literally has a half-life of about 300,000 years, I think. That is some toxic.
It's science, folks. We had it tested.
It shows up on MRIs. It's great.
Well, we always start with an opening debate, and I realized, Adam, we didn't do that right away with Chris. So we got to go, obviously, Philly. So we got to say which one, which cheesesteak. Where are we going for the cheesesteak?
So I'm going to go a little bit far afield. My favorite cheesesteak is up in Roxborough at a place called Chubby's. And
Chubby's cheesesteaks.
Which is what happens when you eat too many of them. But it's amazing. It's great. They've got waffle fries that are delicious. A lot of Philadelphians will argue that directly across the street is D'Alessandro's, and the Chubby's versus D'Alessandro's debate is fierce. My feeling is you can't go wrong, but I'm a Chubby's guy.
Okay.
What makes Chubby's cheesesteaks so good?
Well, I mean,
It's the roll. It has to be, right?
As any good Philadelphian will tell you,
Hey!
the secret to a good cheesesteak is good bread.
Yeah.
So you gotta have the good bread. You get a nice Amoroso's roll, you get the cheesesteak, you get the steak nicely chopped, you get the provolone on there. You want onions, put onions. Hey, that's up to you. But you know what I'm saying? If you don't have the good bread, you're not gonna have a good cheesesteak.
You putting mayonnaise on that?
Hell no.
So we know no mayo.
Sin against God and man.
I know.
No mayo.
It's a weird crutch that I have.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But now you know, Carl, and knowing is half the battle.
That's right. Now, Chris, right before we went on air, you were telling us a little bit about an event you run. Tell me, I know I've never had a chance to go up to your event. Tell us a little bit about it. It's been going on for, a decade-ish or more now, right?
More.
At
It's been going on this will be 15 years since the first one. We took a couple years off for, that whole sort of pandemic thing.
I remember.
Yeah. But
Slackers, taking time off for a pandemic.
We tried to do it virtually and just said, we're just not going to. We were so tired, it was not going to happen. Every year we host EduCon, which is a conference of about 500 or so educators from all over the country who come together to talk about sort of the marriage of progressive pedagogy and modern tools, and really looking at how we need to rethink school to be of service to the kids of today. It takes place at the school. It is run by SLA teachers and students and parents. In fact, today on the main stage with Richard, I'm going to be up there, but also more importantly is Shahad, my co-chair of EduCon, who is a rising senior at SLA, is going to be on stage with us, which I'm super excited about. And it's just this incredibly it's a deep dive, and the pedagogy of the conference mirrors the pedagogy we want to see in our classrooms, so there is no sit and get. Every session is interactive. Every session is hands-on, minds-on, talking, doing, creating, making. And it takes place literally at the school. So the first day of the conference is actually just a site visit. You get to hang out with us. So we try to have as normal a day of school with an extra couple hundred people in the building.
Yeah.
And importantly, it's always the same weekend every year. It's the weekend in between the conference playoffs and the Super Bowl, because this is Philadelphia and hope springs eternal. Go Birds.
We'll be back. Go Birds. That's right.
So for people who are not familiar with your school, tell them what it looks like.
Sure. So SLA is built on our 5 core values. Inquiry, what are the big questions we can ask? Research, how do we find answers to those questions? Collaboration, how do we work together to make those ideas deeper, bigger, richer? Presentation, how do we show what we know? And reflection, how do we step back and learn from what we've done? And that iterative process is going on every day in every class, right? So we believe that we learn best when we have skin in the game, when the learning is authentic, and when we're asking really big questions and then making stuff to show the answers. And sometimes making stuff can be an amazing piece of writing. Sometimes making stuff is a build in our engineering lab. Sometimes making stuff is a film. Sometimes making stuff is an event that you're running in the community,
right,
or an action that you're taking in the community. And so our kids are, sort of out and about in our world. We view the school not as 4 walls and floor, but as a permeable membrane that the world should always be coming in and out of.
I love that, because one thing I've seen with your students, they take part in their learning.
Yes.
Right.
A lot of times learning is done to our students, but in your space, they definitely are an active participant in their learning environment, and that is so amazing.
Yeah, no, SLA kids, it's always kind of fun, when we'll get student teachers or we'll get people, coming in, and they're always shocked by the idea that SLA kids have an expectation of what their class spaces will feel like, act like, be like, and it just is one of those things where they're not afraid to tell you this is our school, and this is our expectation of the kind of agency we're going to have in our classroom. And there's always kind of a funny moment when people will come in from outside and think that they're going to lecture or something like that, and the kids are like, "Oh no, we have questions."
And
we don't
stop.
care who you are, right? But we have questions, so it's kind of fun.
How do you, speaking of learning, and an event like this is so much different than what you just talked about in some ways, right? Because this is very much a go by the seat of your pants, try to find as much as you can, sit and learn. How does someone like you, who's been framed in that iterative process, walk into these sessions? I mean, what does it look like for you? What's Chris Lehmann doing to learn here? I mean, 'cause there's a lot going on, and if you're like me, it's like you almost don't have time.
Sure. Yeah, no, the drink from the fire hose is real. And so there's a couple things. I mean, one is, I think, there's the learning in the sessions, but then there's learning outside the sessions that I've always found to be every bit as powerful. So that notion that, you can sit, I sat in a session earlier this week on Looker Studio, and I was like, oh, this is a tool. I can find 15 uses off the top of my head. I'm writing, I'm, tracking notes on things I want to share with my colleagues at SLA about here are things that we could build with this stuff. But then it was a question of oh, I know Kern Kelly is using that, and he's here. Can I find him? Can I get 15 minutes where he sits down with me and opens up his laptop and shares with me? And I think that becomes the really powerful piece of, as you become, more and more sort of vested in the ISTE community, you know who you can find.
Right.
And it's, one is we all have fun seeing each other, but two is the recognition that this community really is super knowledgeable. So in addition to the fun part of seeing everybody, if you're not picking people's brains while you're here, you're doing it wrong,
Oh yeah. That's always the best part about these events. And we did, of course, ISTE did virtual stuff. Everyone did some kind of virtual conference. They were okay. To kind of keep that.
Best we could do,
right.
I think, in some ways.
But once again, as you mentioned, being face-to-face with people, it's just something different about it. It being in rooms, having the conversations be so organic in nature. Because we had breakout rooms or whatever. You go there for a little bit and somebody had to prompt somebody to say something. You're like, oh, okay.
Right, yeah.
That doesn't happen here.
Right.
Where you're seeing people, you're like, oh my gosh, you're talking about that thing. Tell me more.
Yeah, right. That's right. I mean, that's right. And I think that, and again, we all did that, right? The virtual stuff, we all, whether it was our conferences, whether it was our classrooms, we all made it work the best we could. But that notion of being together, right? And we've said this for a long time, and I think that the pandemic really proved it, which is, once upon a time in school, you went to the classroom because that's where the knowledge was, right? the teacher was the expert, they had the knowledge, and that was the sort of download process, and that was school for a long, long time. And what we've said at SLA for years now is the reason we come together now is because now, the reason to come together is because of the community that you create in that space.
Right.
And I think what the pandemic proved was how vital the physical spaces still are, right? And yes, we learned a ton about how we can leverage the whole world in our classrooms. I mean, if people aren't, we did something this year in our 11th grade history classes where the kids were creating these short documentaries around issues that they care about, and they were making these amazing pieces that went out into the world and really were acting as change agents. And sometimes we were able to bring experts in, so we were able to bring Scott Charles, who's this incredible anti-gun violence expert here in Philadelphia, into school. Mm-hmm. Some local officials were able to come into school. But then we also were able to Zoom with Senator Casey. We were able to Zoom with other folks not from the Philly area. So if we haven't learned what we can do through the virtual space, through the pandemic, we did that wrong. But also, if we didn't learn how to revitalize our physical spaces, we're doing it wrong.
Doing it wrong now. Well, and I think, another disruption that, we have to mention because we're contractually obligated, or that no one will listen to this podcast if you don't say the two letters A and I together. So.
Oh, I thought it was A and N.
No.
Adam's Knuckles?
No, that's A-K, by the way.
No, but, it's...
That just happened, folks, live and on the air.
Okay, you know what?
It's a little tired.
I didn't get my 8 hours of sleep last night. I didn't get my
Somebody
sleep.
get this man a coffee.
Yeah, quick. Do we have any coffee walking by that we can just drink? No.
This is going to be a coffee IV. That's what it is.
So give us your, what's a hot take? What's the Chris Lehmann hot take on AI? I mean, it's been around forever, really, but this new generative age.
So, I am optimistically skeptical. And
way to just put your stake in the ground there.
Right. Well, no. My stake in the ground is that I want us to go slow.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is I think a lot of people are rushing into this is going to be the ... and we don't know.
Right.
And I think that we need to be incredibly intentional in the way that we think about its use. If we just rush in and say, this is great, and zoom through it, we're going to make big mistakes. And we're going to make mistakes with AI no matter what we do.
Absolutely.
Right.
But we cannot be uncritical. Is it powerful? Yes. Is it going to change things? Yes. Is it going to force us to reconsider and rethink the why when we have kids do work? Absolutely. And we don't know the answers yet. And anyone who is saying that they do know those answers, I'm calling shenanigans.
Yeah.
Because we don't.
Right.
So that's where I am skeptically optimistic. I think it is a powerful tool. I think it will change the way we do a lot of things, and I don't think we know. I go back to Neil Postman, right? The inventor of a thing is rarely the best arbiter of its use. And so, I think that the inventors of the thing are arguing its use right now, and we need to remember that there's going to be use cases, and there's going to be positives and negatives with this. There's going to be winners and losers with this, and it is not simply going to be good.
Right.
It is going, and so I think we have to be very intentional and very thoughtful about the why and about what we still expect kids to do, when we do, when we don't, and how we move forward with this in a way that recognizes it's here and it's not going away, but also we can be very reflective.
Yeah.
And with that, it's one of those things with the conversations that we're having. I hear you, and I'm gonna add, if I can add to that, I just hope that we have the right voices in the room when that conversation is happening. Because we're having conversations around AI, but are we having the diverse voices in the room speaking from different perspectives so we can really have a deeper understanding about what it can do, or is it the people who've already decided and we're on the outside looking in?
That's right.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I teach a philosophy elective at school because it's a lens I want kids to have as they take on the world. And we already, for years, I've done a unit on AI and what does it mean to be human, right? Like, And, the big question of iRobot, right? Like, and what
Yes.
happens, what
You
does
went
it
there.
mean?
You didn't go Terminator. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, sure, you can do either one.
+1.
John Connor's trying to warn us, guys.
Exactly. But this year, obviously, when we got to that unit, we discussed AI. And a lot of the kids, it was right when it was breaking, and a lot of the kids hadn't seen ChatGPT yet. So I pulled it up in class, and I took one of the kids in the class, and I, who was a senior, and I was like, look what this can do. And I wrote a good prompt and write me a recommendation letter for Maxine. She is captain of the girls' soccer team. She's an outstanding writer. She volunteers for every school event. Da 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 da. And hey, Kelly. My assistant principal just came by.
That is now live on the podcast.
There we go.
That's
Live on the podcast.
Kelly is now live on the podcast.
Kelly is live on the podcast. She's brand new to SLA this year, also drinking from the fire hose. But in any event, so I showed them this. I showed them the letter that got produced, and I said to the kids, if you knew that this letter would be just as good, if not better, than the letter I would write in getting you into college, would you care that I did it this way? And to a kid, they said yes. They said, no, we asked you to write the letter.
Yeah.
And that's
Very good.
and we dissected it over the period. And what came out was this notion of the act of asking us to write these letters for them is an act of in addition to the the outcome, which is get into college, was also this act of care.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to know we care enough to spend the time to write the letter. And what I've said to the kids is and I take that very seriously. And so I don't use it to write college recommendation letters unless it's, unless you're coming to me and saying I need this for a scholarship for tomorrow.
You're right.
Then you're like, all
Right? And then I'm like,
ChatGPT,
great.
What you got? Yeah.
There it is. But if you ask me in the sort of time frame where I can craft a letter for you, I won't use ChatGPT because the kids don't want me to. And I thought that was telling.
Yeah.
And here I've had some folks say to me, oh, give it 5 years, they won't care. And I'm like,
No.
I'm not sure you're right, and I'm not sure that you understand. And I think in a lot of schools where there isn't a caring relationship between the kids and the adults that we manifest at SLA, that may be true, but those aren't the schools we want. The schools we want are the schools where the kids actually are like, no, please take the time to humanize this for me.
I mean, I know personally, I remember one time when I asked someone to write me a recommendation letter, and they were like, okay, Adam, well, you write it and I'll sign it.
Right.
This was before AI or whatever,
Right.
but I felt some kind of way because I'm like, okay, fine, I'll write it. But to your point, it's something, even when you get that letter and you sit and read it, you're like, oh, this person thinks this about me.
Yeah,
They took
right.
the time to put this into words. That means something.
That's right.
We want that authentic feedback. We want to know where it came from.
That's right.
And with AI, where did it come from?
Right.
And I think about it a lot in the terms of we're seeing now in the sort of, in other industries, right? And I'll use the furniture industry as an example, right? We live through the prefab age.
Right.
Right? And there's still a lot of prefab furniture out there, but there is a massive return to handmade, custom stuff. Now it's more expensive, it's all that stuff. So I think we're going to see these weird, we're going to see a lot of prefab, which is kind of how I think about the generative AI. But we're also going to see, I think, a huge movement of people still wanting the things that are essentially handcrafted.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's going to be interesting to see where do people, and lots of us, in my house, not every piece of furniture I have is handcrafted. In fact, the vast
I'm
majority
surprised,
of it
Chris.
is
I'm
not.
really surprised.
Sup, IKEA.
Principal salary in Philadelphia. my
Sorry.
friend.
Yeah.
But we have a handful of pieces that are handcrafted. And I think that's where this is all going to go.
Yeah, I'm kind of like vinyl. Adam, this reminds me, we need to get our composition book out now because old school composition book with the UnDisrupted label. I'm telling you, it's
it's going to be a thing.
We'll make 25 and 50 cents maybe on it.
Yeah.
Chris, we always ask all of our guests to wrap up what they do to keep themselves undisrupted in this time where there's stuff flying at you, and as a leader, you got stuff coming from all sides. What do you do personally to keep yourself kind of undisrupted?
Sure. I cook, which again shows. I try to sit down and noodle on the guitar every night.
Ooh, okay.
And just play a little guitar, and then I have yet just a good mystery novel on the Kindle for to read and let go of the day. Not that we all read the good books and all that stuff, but just the brain candy stuff to make sure that I'm and then of course, as you know from anyone who knows me, is sports. Right? not let me be a lunatic about Philadelphia sports.
Only how many
Any
days
particular
left?
football team?
Yeah.
Go Birds!
Eagles, I believe is how we spell it.
Fly, Eagles, fly.
Oh, boy.
Where can people find out more about you and your great work, Chris?
So you can find out about Educon by going to educon.org. You can read a very, very old and crufty blog at practicaltheory.org. And you can find more about the school by going to sla.philasd.org.
He's Chris Lehmann, folks. Thank you for joining us on the UnDisrupted podcast, brought to you by All for Ed.
Yep.
He's Adam over there, and you can reach him on Twitter at AskAdam3.
And he's Carl, and you can follow him at Mr. Hooker. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and attendees of all ages,
We are better together.
and we're better undisrupted.